Gallant's reading.
Yeah, because I'm not.
Let's go, David. Woo!
All right.
You got this.
Does it look all right?
Yeah. Yeah. You can sit more comfortable. You like.
Yeah.
I mean, you don't have to be so proper.
Yeah.
Like if I lean, is it okay to lean into the chair?
Yeah.
I can adjust the camera ready.
Oh,
We're
okay.
good. Yeah. Yeah, we good.
We're gonna start off by getting you to introduce yourself. Just tell us about who you are and what you do.
Sure. My name is David Gallant, but most people know me, I guess, Gallant Photo. So that's sort of like my online presence in photography, whatnot, art.
Okay. Cool. All right, we're gonna jump right into it. You're known for doing photography, obviously.
Yeah.
How did your photography help you deal with your depression?
In all honesty, photography is my therapy. I've been battling depression and anxiety for probably the majority of my life. Like, started really early on. I needed an outlet. I used to write a lot. Started painting when I was young, and then I started taking photos to paint from them. And I went to school. Like after high school, I went to school for design and photography, and just really threw myself into the darkroom. Like, back then I was all film, because I started in the 90s. Everything was film, and I would literally throw myself into my work, like, just to kind of, I guess, avoid life. And I was probably partying a little too much when I was young too, but you know, what photography did for me, it gave me a way to create beautiful things from the darkness that was surrounding me. You know, it was like I came from a dark history and a dark background, and so a lot of my photography focuses on light creation and beautiful people, beautiful things, just as a way to kind of sort of strive towards positivity.
Okay. One question I want to ask you, in terms of your childhood, when you were a child, what was some of the things that you feel that kind of like sculpted you into like the man you are today?
So, well, when I was born, my parents weren't really able to have me at that time, and I was adopted out for a good chunk of my life, and unfortunately, the home that I was in was, like, my adopted father was a really bad alcoholic, violent, crazy, and I was basically constantly being trained to, like, go get the neighbors or things like that, and, like, so I was in a constant state of being on guard. And I think growing up, I became that way with people as well. You know, like, not letting people 100% in, because that's how I was wired. Eventually, I was, like, reunited with my biological family, and sort of started moving in a different direction. But, like, your past is always with you. You know what I mean? It's like, when I was a kid, it was difficult for me to speak at all. Like, for me, I was really quiet and really reserved. I also went through a lot of different periods in my life where I was assaulted, severely bullied. Like, we're talking multiple different situations in my life, and after a while you start to kind of give up on things. Also, in my youth, my adopted father was nice enough to be the kind of person that always would tell you that you're not going to become anything. And while he was certainly not being a father, is what it is. I think photography came along at the right time. I honestly don't think I'd be here today. Depression and anxiety can like really take a hold of you and take you in the wrong direction, and I was definitely heading down that path. To this day, I still struggle, but I mean, for me, shooting and creating, whether I'm painting, writing, taking photographs, editing, these things are, in a way, they're a distraction from my life, but they're also that sort of spark of hope that I need. Like, when I can sit back and look at my work and say, I'm really happy with this, then I know I'm like on the right path. I know that there's some sort of a legacy that I'm leaving, that I'm here to create things, and I'm here to meet better people that weren't in my life growing up, but like lately I'm meeting more positive people and trying to shape myself in a different direction. I mean, it makes a difference when you have people who don't believe in you or think certain things are silly. So I'm from a very rural part of Nova Scotia, and where I grew up, not a lot of opportunities. Literally small town, farming, fishing. Everyone plays team sports, hockey and whatnot. I don't play a team sport. I don't watch team sports. I couldn't tell you anything about them. I was literally never into that. I was always more of an artsy kid and liked creating, from the privacy of my bedroom. And so for me, I was a little bit of an outsider. I really didn't talk at all until partway through high school, when I started getting involved in theater. So acting was like my sort of forcing myself to come out of my shell. But at the same time, I would do a lot of heavy drinking, even like when I was underage, just to kind of mask like what I was feeling. So it was like liquid courage. So much to the point that these days I rarely touch alcohol. It's just one of those things. Like, it's very rare for me. But acting definitely led me down the path of the arts and got me into meeting people who were more creative. But I branched more into visual art because I could be more behind the scenes, and I didn't necessarily want to be the one that people were looking at. I just wanted to create work that people looked at, where I wasn't necessarily under a microscope or in a spotlight, but I could create things that were.
It's interesting. Right. The question I want to ask you is, if you were to talk to somebody younger than you, who's like literally going through the same thing as you, and is also in the same line of like creative realm as you, what advice would you give that person to kind of like stay focused and stay sane through all the obstacles and hurdles that are like in their environment, and just like also that they're just creating by themselves? Because like I feel like as artists, a lot of us are perfectionists.
Yeah.
So we tend to like create these, like, we just kind of fathom up these things in our mind, like, oh, like, we have to have this at a certain time, or if I don't have what this person has at this time, then that means I'm not a good enough artist as that person. So what advice would you give to somebody who's younger, who's doing what you're doing, to like kind of like stay focused and like not get sidetracked by the bullshit on the outside?
Just know that like what you create becomes your voice. Like that's your way to communicate with the world, or to communicate with others. This is who I really am. And so that's why you want to stay focused on that and try not to get too derailed. Life has a way of throwing curveballs and like derailing you when you find yourself on a path where you think everything's going great, and then all of a sudden everything just kind of collapses. But you gotta look past it and say, you know what? There's another side to this. There's that light at the end of the tunnel. I'm gonna find it. I'm gonna keep going. Because if you enjoy what you do, then it's the right thing. One thing I learned in life was that, you know, I mean, there's ways I could make more money in this world, but there are things I don't enjoy. Obviously, I'm not wealthy. I don't make a ton of money, but I enjoy what I do. And I think that's the most important. I see people doing a job that they think makes them a lot of money, and they're so miserable. And they go down a career path that they never wanted to be on, and they're so miserable. And I'm just like, I don't want that to ever be me. I was miserable as a child. As an adult, I want to do whatever I want to do. And sometimes people enjoy the things that I make and the things I create, because I do get positive feedback. Not always, but you know, I know that there's something about what I'm doing that's right. And that's sort of that voice that tells you you're on the right path. You're on the right path because you feel like this is what I'm supposed to do. You get into something else in life going on where you're like, well, you know, this could be financially beneficial, but if it's gonna come with a pile of misery, there's no point in that. I've had a lot of things in my life that gave me misery. Now that I'm older, I step away from that. You know, I kind of try to step away from any negativity, isolate myself from negative people. I look for positive people. I look for fellow creatives who want to go in a direction that's more positive, like that's more uplifting than tearing down. You know, I mean, it's easy to tear things down. Building is much more challenging.
That's a fact.
Let's build things up, not tear them down, you know. And be positive.
Definitely. All right, another question I want to ask you is like more along the lines of like depression again. But what I want to know is, what are like other methods that you've taken to deal with it besides the photography? Because I feel like there's a lot of creatives that can relate to this. We all know that as creatives, we love to do what we do, but I feel like there's even moments within that where you also become kind of burned out sometimes.
Yeah.
So because of that, sometimes you kind of like take a step back, or you kind of feel like anything that you're trying to put forward or put out to the world almost feels forced, and that kind of can also create a form of, I guess, like a slight depression. What advice would you give somebody who's going through that, and what are some of the stuff that you do besides photography?
Well, I mean, I try other creative outlets. Like I said, I mean, my background was in painting and in theater. I write a lot of poetry and just random venting. When things get rough, I'll literally just throw headphones on and go for a long walk. And I mean, that's sort of how I zone out of life in general. You know, I just kind of say, well, today I'm going to not do anything, and I'm going to throw myself into listening to some music, or I'll deep dive into like streaming documentaries and like learning, you know, like teaching myself things that I didn't previously know, you know. So I watch a lot of documentaries. I still write to this day. I do meditate from time to time. That is something, when I was a child, I was heavily involved in martial arts and got into meditation that way. It helps. You know, you just literally shut your mind off from the world for a moment. Sometimes you have to, especially if you're in a creative block. You're like, I don't know what to do. But another way to look at it is just do something. Sometimes I'll just pick up the camera and take a walk. I don't have a purpose.
Yeah.
Or I'll meet with a friend or a model or something and say, hey, let's just shoot something. No direction, just let's just shoot something. Just to create something. Because sometimes the inspiration comes in the moment while you're doing it. You don't have to start off with inspiration. And in all honesty, probably half my personal project photo shoots have worked out that way, where I don't start off with, it's like, I want to work with this person. What are we doing? I don't know. But we'll get there.
It's true. All right. When you were a child, you mentioned that you lived in a household with an abusive father.
Yeah.
How did you like manage to like get yourself out of that as a kid? Because like obviously when you're a child, like there's only so much you can do, you know. So how did you remove yourself from that situation, or like just even mentally cope with that?
Well, in all honesty, mentally, I became suicidal. I was not doing well. The family actually broke apart completely by the time I was 13. So I was then with my adopted mother, and I basically became my father at that moment. Like, not as in like him, I became the person that was raising me. So my adopted mother had to go off to work, so we were poor at that point. And so basically I would come home from school, I was by myself, so I'd make my own meals, I would basically run things. And we were also forced out of the home that I grew up in because he wanted to move in there with somebody else. So we were forced to go to a cheaper neighborhood. And so that was different. I had a couple of good friends that I would meet with, you know, and we would, where I'm from, we did a lot of outdoor stuff, trails, camping, hiking, cycling, stuff like that. I mean, like I said, it was really rural. I wasn't in a city where we had any opportunities or anything. I was literally in the middle of nowhere. Like, at most we had, I think, 2 corner stores, and that was it. Everything else was farmland, subdivisions, and a baseball park. And nobody had money where I was, so like we were all kind of similar. And at that point, probably most of the people I knew were from broken homes. So I was also hanging out with people who had a similar outlook that I did, right? So because I didn't fit in with other people, so I hung out with other outsiders. You know, you kind of group together. But I mean, yeah, that was hard, moving neighborhood, not by choice. But I dealt with it. and that's when I started writing a lot.